It's another What We Read
That's
video.
right. And in a series of What We Read where we try to kind of keep it down and keep things short. We have been told, and you folks have been lovely, we have been told in the past that it's like, it's okay, you can make long videos. And it's like, yeah, it's lovely, thank you. But
and we do
also,
when we feel like it.
Absolutely. It's just they're also murder to edit.
And we like to keep things simple.
Right. And as
Path of least resistance.
And as my college English teacher once said, brevity is the soul of wit. She didn't say it that way, and it was totally a quote from somebody else, but I thought that kind of stuck with me. Which like, huh, okay, that's cool. And not that we want to be just witty all the time.
Anyway. I guess in keeping with this whole keeping it short and sweet, let's get right on into the books. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Deathless Girls, which is by Karen Millwood Hargrave. This is a beautiful edition.
Yeah,
sadly, this book was very disappointing for me.
Aww.
It is essentially a story about two sisters. They are taken from their family's caravan. They're travelers in this book.
All right.
And they are serving at a house, and then they eventually end up becoming... It's sort of like an origin story for two of Dracula's wives.
Oh.
Basically.
Okay.
Here's the thing, like the element of the story would have been so interesting. Like I think they could have been compelling. It's just the execution was just not for me. The beginning is so slow. Like like halfway through the book, nothing really had happened outside of what I already mentioned in the summary, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I guess we're gonna go travel to Dracula's place or whatever.
I'm sorry, when you said Dracula, Mel Brooks's Dracula is in my head right now.
Well, like that's why. So the pacing felt all over the place. The characters weren't even very standout or memorable. In fact, they kind of felt cardboard cut out of you, which I hate saying, but like that's how it was. Like I don't even remember very much about them. Like the only thing I remember is that they were sisters. Like that's it. Like
terrible thought in my head is like they're cardboard cut out of you, like most vampires. Anyway,
the funny thing is the way it ends is actually pretty good. Like that's the part that like cool. I'm like at the end of it I was like, oh good. At least it sort of landed somewhere, right? Unfortunately, this book just wasn't for me, and I just am sad about that.
All right, fair.
Because it was very pretty. The second book I'm going to talk about was also a disappointment, sadly.
Aww.
It's a book called Rebel Rose by Emma Theriault. It came out fairly recently, and this is basically the story of Belle and the prince and what happens after she breaks the curse.
So Beauty and the Beast sort of retelling...
It's sort of what happens after
I know this one.
Beauty and the
Okay, yeah,
Beast.
this is like
It's set during the time of the French Revolution. It also features a lot of nods to the original fairy tale as well as the Disney version of the tale.
Oh, okay.
And see, all of those things are great, and they were fun, and they were what kept me reading.
I remember this.
But sadly, it also fell short of my expectations. There was the potential for it to be a book I really loved, because I always find it fascinating when you consider the fairy tale in the context of maybe the actual historical period.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of want to put it in.
You know.
And like, I loved all the nods and stuff. That was really fun. But very similarly to The Deathless Girls, I didn't really feel like any of the characters were memorable. They weren't quite as cardboard cutout-y, but they were still sort of just bland to me, which is like a sad thing for me to say. And I think that's really the downfall of the book, because it is not very plot driven. There is a plot and things are happening, but because it's more like court intrigue type plot and a lot of very internal monologue type plot.
With a bunch of characters that aren't so memorable.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you combine those two things together, the book just falls flat, and sadly for me, it fell flat. Especially because I pretty much guessed how the plot was going to play out possibly halfway through it. So unfortunately that book just wasn't for me, even though the concept is really, really great, and I'm sure there are going to be readers for it out there. Just was not my cup of tea.
Fair.
Moving on from the sad state of the two books I talked about in this video, Mackie can take up.
Right, okay. So I have been yakking all year about Dawn of X, right? Because it is an ongoing series that is technically done already. They've actually moved on, and I can't wait to get started on that. If Marvel Unlimited could just catch up a little bit.
Well, at least it's only 3 months now.
Yeah, the Marvel Unlimited has changed.
They're
instead of partying like it was 6 months ago, it's partying like it was 3 months ago. I still have not verified if this is actually, I have to like top up my subscription, but whatever that is, I have finally in my Kindle Dawn of X 8, 9, and 10. And it's the ongoing saga of a bunch of mutants who have their own country now. And I think one of the best things that I feel sort of works here is that they're able to tell so many new stories, that mutants are practically unkillable now. Or that there are rules to them sort of being killed, and I don't want to preempt sort of like future what we reads, but I did read a lot of the stuff after. I do. But what's great is they've actually repurposed every single X title an X concept that we're familiar with.
That's
so
cool.
The Hellfire Club is now the Hellfire Bay, and it's got like the Red Queen, the White Queen, and the whatever, and Kitty's sort of one of them. that's an ongoing sort of hot mess that they're trying to solve. Storm still is the best like character pretty much almost ever. You've got the Quiet Council. You've got X-Force that is basically now still the CIA. And sort of like the wet works, you know, gotta kill the enemies before they do. So, all in all, can't say enough good things about Dawn of X. There's not one decision here that I, especially with Gabby back, there's not that she ever left. Apparently, she was there the whole time.
I just didn't see her.
I know, I just totally did. Like until they had that weird ass like spin the bottle game. So that's. It's super gory, but hey, but Clan Wolverine, right? I love that they have their own country. I love that they have their own safe space. I love that they are an emerging superpower as a nation, not even just like as a thing, and that puts them at odds with everybody. That's not new. It's just now they're on the front foot, and I love that, and that's cool. Moving forward, I read Venomverse. I know it's so well. Venomverse is basically, for those of you who know who or what Venom is. At one point in time, Spider-Man gets a black costume, which is actually just an alien sort of bonded to him. And eventually that alien goes to Eddie Brock, who is a sort of rival reporter, and he becomes Venom. Basically, what Venomverse is, just like the whole Spider-Verse thing, guess what? It's not just like one Spider-Man in every universe, there's a Venom in every universe too. And in this multiverse of Venoms, Venom actually latches onto different superheroes. You've got Captain America, you've got Doctor Strange, you've got every single person that could have a symbiote has a symbiote. The real problem with this particular thing is that there is another alien life form that actually sort of calcifies the Venom symbiote and their host and turns them into something, you know, like more strong and more powerful. And they're just eating every single Venom that they can find.
Great.
And our Venom, Eddie Brock, 616, nice old guy, gets recruited by Captain America Venom from another universe and says, we gotta stop these guys from eating every single Venom that we bring to fight them. You can already see the problem with that. That's right. It's like, they're eating every single Venom. Throw more Venoms at them. Gee, I wonder how that's going to work out. So
Not
it was...
well, I think.
So Spider-Verse, obviously the more superior, you know, sort of like multiverse spider story. But Venomverse was cute, if you're into that kind of thing. And if you've got Marvel Unlimited, give it a shot. It's part of your subscription. Speaking of subscriptions, Kindle Unlimited has given me a ton of stuff, and you'll see that in the next couple of what we read. Trinity Rebirth Volume 2. Trinity is a DC series about the DC Trinity. That's Bruce, Clark, and Diana. I say that like we're on first name basis because that's just totally me. And so more shenanigans involving the big three, specifically their enemies, so Ra's al Ghul, Cersei, and Lex Luthor sort of band together to like do some crazy stuff and put the superheroes in like a dream state sort of fugue whatever thing, and it's weird and it's not real, but it was real, and then it's a thing, and then it wasn't a thing. Not a great summary for maybe an equally sort of all over the place plot. Do I love Bruce, Clark, and Diana? Absolutely. No love lost there. Did I love this particular one? I don't even remember half of what I read, but that could also be just because I read that quite a long time ago. So if it's part of your subscription, you're getting Kindle Unlimited. Nothing lost there. Click on it, download it, give it a shot. Ending with, anyway, that I'm so glad, look at this, it's not even 10 minutes. Ending with easily the best read of this bunch. So I had to reread Sandman 1 to 3 because I started the audiobook finally, and I finished all the way to I want to say the second volume of Sandman. Because the audiobook actually covers, I think, 1 to 3. And I read as far as the part where Death finally gets introduced. And you know what? I'm a huge fan of Death. I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. And that he got Kat Dennings to play. I'm gonna just, it's not a spoiler. It's out there. The cast list is out. And even Kat Dennings in several, because I had to, like, my fascination with why her. Kat Dennings had the exact same question because she and Neil are apparently Twitter friends. And Neil was like, Kat, you want to play Death? And she's like, do you remember me? Do you remember what I sound like? But then if you listen to the augmented narrations, because obviously Neil, as the narrator, is going to have to narrate what you're actually seeing as opposed to the panels that are just random voice bubbles. So he's actually telling more. The great thing about the audiobook versus the actual graphic novel is that you get to hear a description through Neil Gaiman's actual sort of like vision. So when he describes Death, he even throws in a bit there about how she could have been a waitress at any kind of bar. I don't know if that was an allusion to because you're gonna hear Max from Two Broke Girls if you ever watch it. And I'm sorry I ruined that for you, all of you already. For those of you who don't know who Kat Dennings is and you love Sandman, just go listen to it already. Don't even research anything at all. But for those of you who actually are familiar with her work, you'll hear Kat Dennings' voice, but you will hear, and this is just me being maybe biased, I don't know, but you will hear Death through Neil Gaiman's vision, because Apparently, Kat Dennings is the perfect death for Neil. He could have talked to anyone in the world. And you know what? When I sort of got on that train, and I'll end it with this, it works so well for me because Death is sort of like mundane, average, everyday. She is everyday. She's everywhere. What I'm excited to hear is, you know, all the other stuff that we get to see Death in. If Kat's playing Death throughout the entire thing, I'm excited to see what she can bring to that because it's really good. The acting chops, the levity, but at the same time the gravitas of this ancient, scary being, and I love it. Great audio, great cast. The Sandman has aged so well, I'd like to think, and it's scary as all hell. So that was my Halloween read.
Makes sense. All right, 2 more books. We're gonna take a departure from the science fiction and the fantasy and go into some nonfiction and contemporary. So first is the nonfic book, and I listened to the audiobook of Big Friendship, How We Keep Each Other Close. This is something I read with my sisters Mel and Rachel and our cousin Carmela.
Yes,
well,
the club.
Can't say that Mel's read it. Maybe she will have by the time we watch this video. She started it, she hasn't finished it. But anyway, so Big Friendship is actually written by the 2 people who do the podcast Call Your Girlfriend. I've never listened to that podcast, so I didn't have that context going into the story. But it actually wasn't exactly what I expected. So in my mind, I was like, oh, this is going to be a book about friendship and, like, you know, how to keep those ties of friendship tight despite the fact that you're apart. And in a way it is, because the authors talk about their own experience with friendship with each other and with other people. And I really liked that part of it. Like, I loved hearing them talk about the evolution of friendships, especially as adults. And I also liked how they describe, you know, like, rocky periods you can go through in your friendship, and how, like, sometimes there are things that you might have to grow through or grow out of in order to, you know, keep your friendship the way it is. And to keep it solid, basically. I think what I was not expecting was how biographical some parts of it felt, because they really went deep down into, like, each of their individual stories, like how they got to where they were, like their experiences together and apart. And, like, for me it wasn't quite as interesting just because I didn't really know them, and I generally don't read, you know, about people that I'm not very invested in. So that was kind of like somewhere in the middle for me, but I think overall it was still worth reading just to experience it and to also have some, you know, things that I think about friendship and about friendship evolution validated in the way that they describe them. They even, you know, pulled up some data from, like, different scientific studies. They had some people come in and, like, also talk in the book and also on the audiobook about, like, their different, you know, results. And that was really interesting too. So that was an interesting read. I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Cool.
And the book I'm going to finish out on, Mackie heard me talk about this one, is Sisterhood Everlasting by Anne Brashares. This is the 5th and final book that's part of the Sisterhood series. It was my first time reading it. And essentially it is about the same 4 characters in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants series. So it is about Bridget, Carmen, Lena, and Tibby, only it is 10 years after the 4th book. So 10 years after they're all done with college and now they're all adults and living their lives. So Carmen is in New York. She's an actress. She's dating this guy who's in, I don't know, I don't even remember what his job is, but he is involved in the same field, show business. And then Tibby is in Australia with Brian. Slight spoiler for the rest of the series, but she's in Australia. Lena is still doing art. She's teaching art actually at a school. And then Bridget is in California with her significant other. And here's the thing, there are things that I really enjoyed about this book and there are things I really didn't. On the one hand, I think that it is authentic for these characters to sort of have grown up and not necessarily be the same characters that I loved.
And that's fine.
In their younger years, and that's fine. But honestly, it felt somewhat of a contradiction for some of them specifically. Like, to me, Carmen's character in this one felt like such a departure from who she was, like just her core personality, and like that really bothered me because she was one of my favorites. And then on the other hand, we have Bridget. Her character still maintains the same sort of youth, and I get that that's why she is the way she is in this book, but it was still so just like exasperating to read sometimes and frustrating to read sometimes.
Did it feel like a betrayal?
A little bit. It was funny because I actually liked Lena's story in this one. Okay,
that's cool.
Which was weird because when I was rereading the other 4 books in the series, I was kind of frustrated with her a lot. And in this book, wow. I still found some of the things she did frustrating, but she actually was the one who was acting the most, I guess, the most relatable for me, so I appreciated that. And then Tibby's whole storyline is just a travesty. I'm not even gonna say what it was, but it was a travesty and I'm still mad about it.
I haven't read it, but I am sort of invested. I agree.
Here's the thing. I really feel for all of the big emotional upheavals that happen in this book. I do. I definitely do. But at the same time, I was also just frustrated because for me, I'm like, it didn't sit well, basically. A lot of different elements were introduced into this that I was just like, why? It felt a little bit cheap, which I didn't want to say. And like, it's hard to like say that I dislike this book because there were moments that I was like, oh, this is super relatable, this is super heartwarming, this friendship aspect of it is still the part that I love the best, but it was so frustrating. Mackie just heard me rant like half the time I was reading this because I was like, I just need to get it out of my system because so much is going on that I find frustrating, I find contradictory, and I was just like...
Yeah, if you watch the movie, it's pretty heartbreaking.
Maybe you should just end with book 4. Maybe you could just end there. But actually, I think actually book 4 is not even my favorite. But you know, at the end of the day, if you are invested in the story of these girls and their friendship, there is something to be said for the through line of that in this novel, and that's the part that will make it worth the read in the end. Yeah, I think.
And we're pretty much a house that sort of like really aims to respect like the wishes of the author. I mean, you can disagree with it like all you want.
Yeah, I disagree. But right, like at the end of the day, this is how
and it's like, okay, that's how you want to tell your story. That's how you want to tell your story. That's totally on you. We don't have to like it, but we get it. Yeah. Like, we can at least attempt to sort of understand and go, okay, I see what you tried to do there. Yeah. And hope you're happy with that.
I am not. But anyway, we're gonna end the video on that note because this is apparently the ranty version of the what we read videos we're filming today.
That is true. A little bit of a rant here and there.
We hope you enjoyed them.
Or holler at us in the comments. I mean, I'm sure there are enough.
I'm curious to see if anybody else has actually read
Babysitters Club. Traveling Pants fans.
I'm curious to see if anybody else feels similarly about that book.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, we hope you liked this what we read, and we hope you will be back to watch the next one next week.
See ya.